going on, guys? Welcome back to Nacho Wrestling, and in today's video essay, we are taking a look at the best bout machine, Kenny, by God, Omega. And we are taking a look at why I believe Kenny is not only the key to success for AEW's wrestling future, but the key to success for AEW's business future as well. We have a lot of things to discuss in this video today, from Kenny Omega's role as a founding father of AEW to his global cross-promotional skills. Like I said, there's a whole laundry list of things to talk about, so let's jump into it. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell to stay up to date on all things Nacho Wrestling, and if this is your first time watching a Nacho Wrestling video, why don't you consider hitting the subscribe button. I'm trying to reach 500 subscribers, and your help would be greatly appreciated. Starting off with foundational role in AEW's creation. As we all know, Kenny, of course, is one of the founding fathers of AEW, along with the Young Bucks, Matt and Nick Jackson, Tony Khan, and of course, the undisputed WWE Champion, Cody Rhodes! Adrenaline in my soul, every thought out of control. Do it all to get them off their feet. Kenny's presence in the company early on did something that not any other presence besides maybe Chris Jericho or the inevitable Mox debut was able to do for the company. And that was the ability to give AEW a feeling of legitimacy as a true alternative, not only for content to the WWE, but for places for wrestlers to go to make a genuine payday that isn't named the WWE. Another major thing is the global appeal. Kenny Omega did something that no one in the history of AEW was able to do, and he was able to bring over a crop of fans from Japan. A huge crop of fans from Japan. You could make the argument that guys like Will Ospreay and Jay White, and even to an extent Kyle Fletcher or Mark Davis Aussie Open, brought over Japan fans from New Japan, or Okada even brought Japan fans over from New Japan. And while that may be true, no one brought over more New Japan fans than Kenny Omega. That guy had the Japanese crowd in a chokehold. They loved him. They loved everything he was doing, and they wanted to see what he was going to do, whether it was in Japan or not. It also did help AEW in the long term make an easygoing relationship with New Japan, something that has been rather fruitful for AEW, and rather parasitic for New Japan. Moving on to wrestling talent and versatility. I've said this in countless videos in the past, but one thing it takes to be a good wrestler, at least in my opinion, is the ability to wrestle any style. Now, you don't have to wrestle any style perfectly, but to be able to add little sprinklings of technical wrestling, high-flying wrestling, strong style wrestling, lucha libre style of wrestling, luchador wrestling, all these different styles of wrestling that we see, to be able to mix that all within your in-ring repertoire really takes a masterful wrestler. I think guys that are able to do that are obviously Bryan Danielson, to an extent. I think CM Punk can do this sometimes. Maybe back in the day, CM Punk. Nowadays, he kind of is better at the WWE style stuff. Samoa Joe, I think, is another solid example of this. AJ Styles is another fantastic example. But Kenny Omega stands heads and shoulders above the rest as a guy who is able to do just about anything in that ring. From comedy matches with guys like Kota Ibushi and DDT Pro, and comedy matches in AEW like the 5-on-5 match with the Dark Order. That did turn into a bit of a comedy spoof when they wore their Toon Squad jerseys and were doing dunks in the basketball hoop on Dynamite and everything like that. To his death matches with guys like Jon Moxley, and early on his death match with Joey Janela. But above all else, Kenny is able to wrestle a normal style. A style that really doesn't look like any particular style because it's his own. I think the best example of that is his match with Bryan Danielson at the inaugural AEW Grand Slam. Those two just went in there together and they put on an absolute barn burner. And I don't want to glaze the match too much because obviously everyone knows that Bryan Danielson's my favorite wrestler ever, so that match is going to be highly regarded by me because Kenny Omega is probably another top 5 wrestler for me. So when two of my top 5 guys are in the ring together, of course I'm going to think it's the greatest thing on the planet. Moving over to his work as AEW World Champion and the belt collector gimmick. Simply put, when Kenny Omega was AEW World Champion, there was a prestige to the world title that I don't think we've ever seen in AEW before or since. You could make the argument that the entire first 4 champion run of the world title in AEW was very prestigious, held by Chris Jericho for a long period of time, then held by Mox for a long period of time, then held by Kenny for a long period of time, then held by Hangman for... Oh. That's right. He lost it to Punk after like 4 months. Plain and simple, Omega helped solidify AEW's World Championship as something that should be genuinely sought after, something that could be seen as a top prize, especially when someone like Kenny Omega or someone like Hangman Adam Page is holding that belt for the company. Talking about the Belt Collector era for a second, Omega's run as the Belt Collector was something magical, something that we've never truly seen on either WWE or AEW since or before or ever. But the idea that Kenny Omega was working with Don Callis to get the world title in AEW and then use that as a way to jump over to TNA and win the World Heavyweight Championship in TNA, and then inevitably winning the Impact Championship in TNA, or vice versa. I don't know how it works because they're TNA now, but they were Impact then, and they'll probably go back to Impact at some point, but then they'll go back to TNA again. Maybe they'll be bought out by Panda Energy again. This work that AEW and Kenny Omega were doing was able to help establish the company not only as a place and destination for wrestlers to go to be able to tell stories where they want to tell those stories, but a place where companies can come and work together. They're not just confined to the stories that they tell in their own company. New Japan can do a story beat in AEW if they want. AAA used to be able to do story beats in AEW. Now it's CMLL. And of course you have Impact/TNA, which used AEW a lot to get some exposure and mainstream exposure on their company back in 2021. At the end of the day, this helped establish AEW as less of an independent, smaller promotion and more of a small, slowing global brand. Next up, we have cross-promotional appeal. I mentioned this one at the top of the video, but there is a obvious global cross-promotional appeal for Kenny Omega, especially with the fact that he still works with New Japan as of 4 days ago, I think. He also had that aforementioned stint in Impact TNA Impact. And a lot of people forget this one, mainly because I think it was well before the Belt Collector gimmick and well after the Belt Collector gimmick. But his 2-year run with the AAA Mega World Championship was something that the likes of AAA has never seen before. I don't think they will ever see again. Unless Vikingo beat that record when he beat him for the belt. If you really take a look at it, the entire Forbidden Door concept was established and able to be created by someone like Kenny Omega. Someone who had those ins with AAA, New Japan, TNA, essentially every company on the planet Earth not named the WWE. Kenny Omega had some sort of connection to them. Focusing specifically on that partnership with New Japan for a second, Omega's involvement with New Japan and AEW was of course an obvious one. He left New Japan very vocally, very obviously, and New Japan was very obviously hurt by this. Having him go out on his back against Tanahashi at Wrestle Kingdom 18, I think, or 17, I think. But this partnership that AEW and Kenny Omega and New Japan had all together was able to help AEW practically poach talent from New Japan. From the likes of Jay White and Will Ospreay and Aussie Open and Kazuchika Okada, they've established a who's who murderer's row of former New Japan talent over in AEW. And all of that can be thanks to Kenny Omega bridging the gap between AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling. Moving on to number 5, we have character development and storytelling. One thing that I think Kenny doesn't get enough credit for, that a lot of other wrestlers do get some credit for where they don't necessarily deserve it, is Kenny's consistency to his character. He lets every little thing that happens to his character, whether it's on screen, off screen, online, offline, no matter what, He lets everything he does and say impact his character within the wrestling ring. When he first came into AEW, he was the happy-go-lucky best Bout Machine, the guy that knew he could be on top of the company. And then for the next couple of years, mainly year and a half, 2 years, he was lost, adrift, not in the world title scene, and it was confusing. So he ended up partnering up with his good friend Hangman Page, who was also lost and aimless at the time, and they bodied the tag team division together, becoming tag team champions rather quickly. And every little thing that him and Hangman did together only added fuel to the fire to that inevitable turn to the belt collector gimmick. And I've already talked about the belt collector gimmick in this video, so I don't feel the need to talk about it anymore, but obviously the belt collector gimmick does affect everything Kenny does after that. From his odd, weird face turn back to the best Bout Machine after his first injury stint and time off, to whatever he starts doing here in the new year on Dynamite, January 8th as I'm recording this. Talking specifically about the Hangman Page feud here for a second, I've mentioned it very briefly here in the video, but I think I'd be hard-pressed not to talk about it. The Hangman Page feud with Kenny Omega solidified AEW as a legitimate pro wrestling company, and I stand by that statement and will die on that hill whenever I need to, because I genuinely believe that that is their story. That will be the backbone of their company. That is their Rock Austin. That is their Austin McMahon. That is their Cena Orton. That is what they will be able to come back to. Either both guys as faces, both guys as heels, one guy is a face, one guy is a heel, vice versa. They will always be able to do something fresh and new with that feud. And those two are creative geniuses in that ring. Everything they did together, from their tag team run and the constant will they won't they turn on each other aspect, especially after they lost the tag titles, and to the one time they teamed up together and reunited as a full-fledged member or full-fledged elite for the first time in All Elite's history. Simply put, the feud between Page and Omega is a absolute masterclass of long-term storytelling, and it's something that either AEW or Kenny Omega needs to bring forward more of in 2025 to help AEW reinvigorate their storytelling and get more fans watching the product. Moving on to number 6, we have influence behind the scenes. Taking a look at Omega's creative mindset, one thing that I don't think a lot of people remember from the first year or 2 years of AEW is that all members of the Elite were in charge of something within the company. Whether it was Cody Rhodes, who was seemingly in charge of the world title scene, or the Young Bucks, who were obviously in charge of the tag team division, and Kenny Omega, who was shockingly in charge of the women's division. He brought Joshi-style wrestling to a Western audience, something that a lot of us in the United States have never seen before, with the likes of Riho, Emi Sakura, Hikaru Shida, Aja Kong. All these great Joshi pros came in, and it eventually allowed AEW to start a strong, healthy relationship with Stardom over in Stardom over in Japan, which is New Japan's sister company. You could really feel his influence within the women's matches during the first couple of years of AEW, especially from that hard-hitting standpoint and fast-paced action. The women were trying to move at a very fast pace, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that Kenny Omega was giving them a bulk of the pointers. As one of AEW's top stars, Kenny Omega has a duty to fill as a mentor and leader to the entire locker room, something that CM Punk was trying to do in the company, but I think that role should and always have been filled by Kenny Omega. He's obviously contributed to AEW's ability to attract top talent, guys like Okada and Will Ospreay and Jay White, all the guys I've mentioned already, but they want to come in here and work with Kenny and be able to have complete creative freedom and come up with stuff with Kenny, not having writers and producers and whoever tell them, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to hit this, you need to hit that. They just want to work. I think a big thing with that is that Kenny has made it a point to try and elevate whoever he is in the ring with at all times, whether that be the best wrestler in the world or whether that be some random Joe Schmo off the street. Kenny is going to do what he can to make his opponent look good, whether his opponent is going over or not. Moving on, we have his innovative wrestling style and his ability to help define AEW's identity. Omega's unique approach to wrestling is something, like I said, we have not been able to see before. His ability to wrestle several different styles, from the comedy to the serious to the not so serious to the death match to the whatever you want to say. He's really able to wrestle any style, and that is something that AEW has that WWE hasn't. They have the ability to show different types of matches. You want to watch a strong style match between Okada and Will Ospreay? You're going to get that. You want to watch a high-paced, high-octane, fast-moving match between Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega? You're going to get that. One thing about Kenny, though, is that his matches always feel fresh, exciting, and new. He's not always hitting the same sequence of moves. He's not always hitting the same couple of moves in every match. He's doing something new. He's doing something fresh, or at least trying to do something new and something fresh in every match, or almost every match. Moving over to something a little more out there is the fact that Kenny Omega, especially within his run in AEW, throughout his entire run in AEW, has been able to embrace the hardcore and deathmatch style of professional wrestling. Primarily with his feuds with Mox over the years. We've seen them wrestle in an exploding barbed wire death match, which ended... well, it ended. There was, of course, their great Lights Out match at Full Gear, right? Full Gear? I think that's right, Full Gear. I'm gonna say it's Full Gear. There's the singles match they had at Winter is Coming, where Omega won the AEW World Championship off Mox. This ability to embrace the goofier side of pro wrestling just shows not only what type of leader and what type of guy Kenny Omega is, but it shows that he really is a wrestling fan, because true fans of wrestling will watch any type of wrestling or try any type of wrestling, however you want to phrase that. They'll try it, watch it once. And if it's not for them, they won't come back to it. That's okay. But if you really are a fan of wrestling, you'll give anything a shot. You genuinely will. And I think that's evident with Kenny. He gave deathmatch wrestling a shot. He likes it. Moving on to the penultimate talking point, we have Kenny Omega as a cultural icon. Unlike Roman Reigns or Cody Rhodes or Seth or CM Punk or anybody like that from the WWE, you know, these big billboard type names, Kenny Omega has a genuine feel to him. You see him mentioned a lot in certain rap songs from guys like West Side Gun and Benny the Butcher. They're huge Kenny Omega fans. And of course, Kenny is a huge anime fan. You even see him with sponsorships on his streams from games like Street Fighter and Tekken and all these different fighting games. Another big influence beyond wrestling for Kenny is the fact that he has been often referred to as the Michael Jordan of professional wrestling, going so far as to having a Michael Jordan-esque intro for his AEW entrances over the past couple of years, which, as of recording this, I'm not sure if he brought that back for Dynamite. I will have to find out if he brought that back. Either way, there is a huge cultural iconography with Kenny Omega, akin to Seth Rollins, I would say. You know, I think that's the best example, because Seth isn't a household name. Whether, and you know, fight me on that in the fucking comments, I don't care, but I don't think Seth's a household name. I really do think that Seth is obviously mainstream fans are obviously going to know who Seth is, and I think mainstream fans even know who Kenny is, because back in 2017 or 2018, they did a little thing for the Royal Rumble, and this was deleted off YouTube after an hour of being on YouTube. I'm gonna try and find it and put it in this video, but you have Seth Rollins saying that he wants to see Kenny Omega in the Royal Rumble. So like, mainstream fans know who this guy is. They talk about him, and I think he is their Moby Dick. I think he is a guy that they never got, and they are fucking pissed to this day that they never got him. And with each passing day that he just builds his stock higher and higher and higher outside of the WWE, making more and more and more money for himself, that is just going to piss WWE fans and WWE itself off even more. The final talking point is the long-term investment in AEW's legacy. Now, I know when I say long-term investment, you're going to be saying to yourself, long-term? Kenny's like 30, almost 40. There's nothing long-term about him. And especially with the mileage he has on his body, he's going to retire as an active competitor sooner rather than later. And while all that may be true, I think one thing that Kenny is going to do more likely than any other member of the Elite or any other EVP or former EVP or future EVP of AEW for that matter, is I think Kenny is going to sit back and take a creative position within the company once his time is up. I think that's how he helps AEW's legacy for the future. I think Kenny Omega as possibly head booker of the company, taking the roles from Tony Khan and letting Tony Khan run the business side of things, get better ad deals, get better sponsorships, all this stuff, and let an actual guy who knows the ins and outs of professional wrestling, like genuinely, and isn't just a fan. I think that will be something that helps AEW a lot more. Kenny Omega remains an irreplaceable part of AEW. If you took him out, the entire company would crumble. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, his stock has lowered a lot since he's been out for a year and a half. And sure, not a lot of people are talking about him right now. The hot topic to talk about is, of course, Will Ospreay, Kazuchika Okada, Swerve, Hangman, all these other guys right now. But I think it's not going to take long for you to realize that the god of this shit, the real guy you should be talking about, is the best Bout Machine, the cleaner, the belt collector, the one-winged angel, Kenny, by God, Omega. Let me know what you guys thought about that video down in the comments below. What do you think about Kenny Omega and his role for AEW's success? Do you think he plays a role in it at all, or do you think it's something else entirely? Like I said, let me know down in the comments below. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell to stay up to date on all things Nacho Wrestling, and I will see you guys next time.